Alright, hi. I spent the last couple of days reading all the Elden Ring item descriptions that I could find, and looking over all the old trailer footage and screenshots, and this is my thoughts on sort of what we can expect from Elden Ring's world and kinda how it works. I feel a bit weird doing this because I currently don't have any information that anyone who hasn't followed the public news stuff and looked at the network test would also not have. So despite that, I'm going to say there might be some spoilers in this. It's entirely conjecture. But, I think I've hit upon a couple of things about the Elden Ring world that they don't explicitly say in the network test or in any of the promo materials. So, assuming that anything I say is right, which is probably, it's not a guarantee, but if it is right, then that's kind of a bit significant, and I'm possibly going to spoil, some late-game Elden Ring surprises. But, yeah, I'm just warning you now that it might get spoilery, but we actually won't. It's like Schrodinger's spoiler, we won't know until the thing is out if I was right or not. But, yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here, obviously, so I'm going to try breaking this down into some, digestible form. So we start off with two, I'll just say entities called the Two Fingers and the Three Fingers. So the Finger Maidens, the Finger Maidens are responsible for guiding the Tarnished to what's just called the Grace. So this pilgrimage thing in which the Tarnished are going toward the Grace, seeking the Grace, is described as happening in accordance with the Grace's own will. It's not clear if the Two Fingers actually are some sort of manifestation of the Grace and the maidens serve the Two Fingers and serve the Grace indirectly through that, or if the Grace is a separate thing and the Two Fingers is just, or whatever it is, some sort of entity that is just sort of tasked with maintaining the Grace's will. It's not clear. So the Two Fingers is also associated with three of the what are called incantations, which are basically, in some cases, literally just the miracles from the Souls games. And they're all low-level sort of defensive healing stuff that in Dark Souls you would kind of expect to be associated with a Way of White. So those are Heal and Cure Poison, which are self-explanatory, and one called Rejection. That is the Force spell from Dark Souls. It's like a shockwave that sort of pushes things away from you. So these mention the Two Fingers, but they also mention the maidens working for something called the Finger Reader. And again, it's not clear what the hell the Finger Reader is. Is it a person? Is it an entity? Is it a code? I don't know. The Two Fingers is also responsible for giving us something called the White Cipher Ring. When you use the White Cipher Ring, it requests help from other players if you're being invaded by what's called a Bloody Finger, which is the Red Phantoms from the Souls games. So it's analogous to something like the Dark Moon Ring or the Blue Sentinel Ring. So what I'm getting at here is the Two Fingers are very obviously coded as the holy faction, the not necessarily the good ones, but the holy ones, the ones that are about healing and defense. Again, going back to sort of analogies from other Souls games, they're very similar, from what I can tell, to Way of White. And they are, importantly, responsible for guiding the Tarnished to the Grace, which is, from what we can tell, that's kind of the plot of the game. You gotta go get that Grace. Now, the Three Fingers is where it gets, for me, kind of very interesting, and why I was describing the Two Fingers as some sort of entity. So we get one direct reference to the Three Fingers in the network test. It's also on an incantation, but it's an incantation that's not taught by Finger Maidens. It just says it came from the Three Fingers, and the Three Fingers are described explicitly here as maddening. And what this incantation does is, it's called the Flame of Frenzy, and it inflicts what appears to be a kind of madness status. Now, madness does actually exist as a status in Elden Ring, but as far as I can tell, one thing in the network test maybe possibly inflicted madness, and it was the guy with all the arms in Stormvale. The problem is, like, I just killed it, so I don't know what madness does. But yeah, the three fingers are associated with madness, and it says, those whose eyes are afflicted with the flame of frenzy are racked with maddening pain and unstoppable tears. So there's something about the three fingers is like really sort of destructive and chaotic, and it's the opposite of the two fingers. Now, let's remember back to the Elden Ring trailer. There was a big glowy hand in it. The hand was yellow, and that hand had three fingers. So this fairly inexplicable at the time image is actually starting to make sense, because that thing there might actually be either the three fingers itself or like a manifestation of the three fingers, and that's presumably why it's in a cutscene. It's like grabbing us. It's like going to be somehow important to the plot, this three fingers thing. Moreover, if we look at the design of the hand, it's got three fingers because it looks like it was cut in half. And if you cut the hand in half there, then what you'd have left would be two fingers. So it looks like, I'm speculating, but it looks very much like the idea of this opposed sort of conflict between a sort of healing, protective two fingers and a maddening, destructive three fingers is because they're actually like two halves of the same hand that was cut down the middle, and you have like the three fingers, or rather two fingers and a thumb, and then you have the two fingers. And if we follow this line of thought, things get even more interesting, because listen to what Melina says.
Have you heard of the Finger Maidens? They serve the two fingers, offering guidance and aid to the tarnished. But you, I am afraid, are maidenless. I can play the role of maiden.
She doesn't actually come out and say she's a finger maiden. She says that she's going to play the role of a finger maiden, she's going to guide you to the Erd Tree, but she never says that she's a finger maiden. So keeping in mind that finger maidens serve the two fingers, look at the tattoo over Melina's eye. That looks a lot like a hand with three fingers. So I think Melina might actually be a servant of the three fingers, and she's going to be taking us on what we're told is like the pilgrimage that all the tarnished go on to the grace, but she's actually sort of manipulating us, getting us to do something that maybe isn't part of the pilgrimage for the other tarnished, has ulterior motives. I think that might be what's going on here. So speaking of the Erd Tree, and I guess by extension like the Elden Ring itself and the Golden Grace and everything, it should be pointed out, and I think this is really important, that the Elden Ring and the Erd Tree are not a creation myth. They are a historical event. There is recorded history before either of these things existed, and it seems to be, I think, reasonably recent. So one of the kingdoms that we hear about is called Karya. It's not clear if Karya is still around, but if it did collapse, it collapsed like relatively recently. So this Karya place, really, really important. We'll talk about it in depth later, but I just want to establish for now, Karya is somewhere that, even if it has fallen, there's people from Karya that are like wandering around. It's like Kareem in Dark Souls 3 or something like that. So with that in mind, let's look at the telescope description. Astrology tool used by members of the Karyan royal family. During the age of the Erd Tree, Karyan astrology withered on the vine. The fate once writ on the night skies had been fettered by the Golden Order. In other words, Karya was important before the Erd Tree happened, before the Elden Ring, before the Golden Order. It's quite possibly still around and just a shadow of its former self. But, yeah, this Erd Tree thing, this happened, like, after Karya was established. So Karya is really, really big on this stuff called Glintstone. Glintstone is the basis of the sorceries in the game. It's like a weird blue rock, and it's why the magic in Elden Ring is very, very, very blue. Glintstone is physical stuff that falls out of the sky. It's referred to as star amber, and it seems to work like meteorites. It's like something that falls out of the sky. And one of the Glintstone spells that is in the network test literally is you opening a portal and a bunch of meteorites come out of it. And you might think to yourself, that sounds very, very Bloodborne, and I'm going to say yes, it does. And it's going to get even more Bloodborne very, very soon. Now, it's true that there are what are called Glintstone mines in the network test. We visit one of them, and people there are mining Glintstone. So you might think to yourself, well, Glintstone's actually underground. It's not coming from space. Except we hear in several of the item descriptions about an underground king who prized meteorites. And when we get to the boss arena of that Glintstone mine, there is a meteorite embedded in the ground. So the reason Glintstone is underground is that meteorites, presumably in the distant past, hit the Earth and they deposited all this Glintstone there. So even before people presumably properly understood what Glintstone was and where it came from, they were still using it, but to them it was something that you dug up. So we know from the spell descriptions that Karya is/was kind of obsessed with Glintstone. And we also know that with the establishment of the Erd Tree and the Golden Order, Karya kind of withered. It sort of like fell into ruin because presumably it didn't have access to all that astronomy and astrology that it was based on. But we also hear about something called the Raya Lucarian Resurgence. Now you can kind of tell from the names that Karya and Raya Lucaria probably connected. Also, Raya Lucaria is where all the Glintstone sorcerers are coming from, so it's definitely part of Karya. And they refer to what's called the Raya Lucarian Academy. So it's not clear if Raya Lucaria is a place and the academy is there, or the academy in Karya is called Raya Lucaria. They don't actually specify as far as I know. But regardless, something happened in Raya Lucaria that led to some sort of renaissance of Glintstone. Now, this place that we see in the trailers, this is almost certainly, it's either going to be Karya or Raya Lucaria or some sort of Raya Lucarian outpost, I don't know, but it's something to do with Raya Lucaria because everything is wreathed in this unnatural blue, which is very Glintstone. The characters there are wearing the Mask of Karalos, which is associated with Raya Lucaria. This is something to do with that. Now, one of the things about this place that people were always commenting on is, this looks very unnatural. It doesn't look like it's a night here. It looks like people compared it a lot to Irithyll in Dark Souls 3. There is something that is making the sky in wherever this is, Raya Lucaria, we'll call it Raya Lucaria for now. There is something that is making the sky in Raya Lucaria different to the rest of the sky in the game. So, Elden Ring has a dynamic day-night cycle. If you played the Elden Ring Network Test or watched people play it, did you notice something wasn't there at night? Elden Ring does not have stars. Now, astronomy needs stars. It needs celestial bodies, and there aren't any, and we know that the reason there aren't any is because of the Golden Order and the Erd Tree and the Elden Ring. So that line that we all heard in 2019,
that which commanded the stars,
that was probably literal. The Elden Ring actually did something to the stars. It blotted them out somehow. It moved them, I don't know, but it did so. It commanded them. Now, let's go back even further to the handheld, like, grainy potato quality leaked trailer that we saw. The end of that features this, like, astrologist slash onmyoji looking character who calls down a fake, kind of like sky moon, it looks like an illusion, in this room. That sky has stars. Now, I am calling this an illusion reflexively because of basically how it's introduced, but is this an illusion, or is this what the sky actually looks like if there's no Elden Ring? Because if Raya Lucaria have figured out a way to kind of pierce through the Elden Ring / Golden Order, whatever you want to call it, and see the true sky, and the old Karyan power was based on astronomy, this would explain why you have a Raya Lucarian resurgence, because they've tapped back into the sky as it was before the Golden Order. And I think there's even more to it than that, because when I was going out of bounds, I found this thing and I joked that it was half the Lord Vessel. And then someone pointed out in the comments that that is a sundial. And then I remembered that one of the nouns that you can write in the messages is stone astrolabe. An astrolabe is something that keeps track of things in the sky. And this thing here, that's made of stone, and the fact that it's a noun, like this is something that you can just leave a note saying, hey, stone astrolabe this way, suggests that these things are important and they're recurring. You want to know what else was in the sky? All those bits and pieces of ruined temple that are lying around. Those, very explicitly, are not temples that were built there and then collapsed and have like eroded and half sunk into the ground. Those were in the sky, and at some point they broke off and went splat. There is a lot of stuff happening in the sky in Elden Ring that we are not privy to at the start. And going back to the trailers, the sky goes red at one point. Like, that would not surprise me if that was some kind of endgame state. And again, like, going back to this game's antecedents, specifically going back to Bloodborne, Bloodborne's whole third act hinges on a bunch of eldritch hidden stuff in the sky that was being obscured by something, and our character's actions causing that to break and reveal the truth of what is happening. And also, going back to the idea of a temple in the sky, look at this room here. I think it might be significant that we see this room that's clearly like a temple in the sky, that parts are like breaking off, but they're not falling, they're like suspended in midair. So this might be the Sky Temple. If we look out it's not really a window, like the whole back wall fell out, but if you look out there, that does not look like the in-game skybox. There is no golden Erd tree light, and it just looks like we're in the clouds. I also wonder if the sort of half-buried golems and the weird burning heads that we've seen, but that maybe have been cut from the final game, I don't know. I wonder if those are actually the remnants of like a fight that took place in the sky and this stuff just fell to earth. The stone heads in particular kind of interest me because there's references to a group of monks who worship what's just called the Giant's Flame of Ruin, and those heads are indeed giant, and there does appear to be a flame in them. And there's also a non-3 or 2 fingered hand that we see very briefly, like attacking someone, and that appears to I don't know how you'd count because it moves so quickly, but that I think has it's way more fingers than a human hand. It has I think 10 or 12 fingers on it. That might actually be from the same source as the heads. It looks to be about the same scale, but yeah. Anyway, like I said, that's my current understanding of the world of Elden Ring. There's a lot of potentially interesting stuff there, and like I said, I don't know where any of it's going, and I also don't know if it's right. I don't know if they're going to release a trailer tomorrow that reveals that, like, Raya Lucaria is a beachside resort. I don't know. So we hear also about a bunch of like little factions and like kings and knights and barbarians and generals and things, and I don't know how important they're going to be, but I might do something on them later on, but I'm not quite sure where they fit in the world, and right now the world is what I'm interested in. So yeah, Elden Ring, it's looking very weird.